The stage was dark. A church bell rang, low and slow, breaking the silence. The pale yellow light gradually revealed an ancient Italian church, where stone walls had stood through centuries of war, plague, and prayer. Here, people believed that faith would protect them from life's vicissitudes. A hymn rose, gentle and mournful. Maria and Giovanni sat side by side, listening to the familiar sound, as if listening to the lingering memories of the deceased. No one knew that, when the bell finished its final chime, the earth would begin to speak. The light dimmed slightly. The peace remained, but only for its last breaths. Part I, The Morning Bells, Introduction. The stage opens in the soft golden light of early morning, enveloping an ancient church in the heart of Italy. The soaring dome reaches towards the sky. Time-worn statues of saints stand silently, witnessing generations come and go. The church bells ring out, echoing far and wide in the quiet space, as if awakening a dormant past. In the heart of ancient Italy, there are churches that have stood for hundreds of years, enduring fierce wars, devastating epidemics, and countless historical events. Here, countless silent prayers have been heard. Small hopes entrusted in silence and faith. People will leave, time will sweep everything away, but faith remains, silently but steadfastly, until the day the earth trembles and destiny changes. The hymn, sung by the choir, its melancholic yet sacred melody filling the church, resonated. In the front row, Maria and Giovanni sat side by side, their eyes locked in unspoken thoughts. Maria gently tilted her head, her voice soft as a whisper. She asked Giovanni if he heard it. Her grandmother used to love this song. In that moment, memories seemed to come alive amidst the weathered stone walls. Giovanni smiled, his voice warm and calm. Every time he heard this familiar melody, he felt as if his entire family were still there, present in the church, amidst the sacred sounds and memories that had never faded. Maria looked directly at the altar, speaking slowly. For her, the church was not just a religious structure, but also their memories, a place that held love, loss, and faith. She reminded Giovanni never to forget it. Part I, the Mass interrupted. Father Pietro ascended the pulpit in the still warm churchlight, but the atmosphere had begun to grow heavy, as if a silent omen was spreading throughout the space. All eyes followed him, awaiting his familiar sermon amidst the seemingly peaceful Mass.
Faith is not a shield against suffering,
reminding the congregation
but the strength that keeps the soul standing when pain arrives without warning.
Faith, in his words, is the strength that helps people stand firm, keeping their souls from collapsing when true suffering arrives, unexpectedly and without warning. At that moment, the ground trembled slightly. The high-hanging lights in the church began to sway gently,
as if its solid foundations had
a
suddenly
commotion
crumbled.
quickly spread among the pews, anxious eyes searching for each other in silence. Giovanni leaned slightly toward his mother, his voice trembling with fear. He whispered that he felt the church shaking, as if its solid foundations had suddenly crumbled. Maria immediately grasped his hand, trying to remain calm despite her pounding heart. She reassured Giovanni in a low, slow voice, saying that God was there and would protect them. But the shaking didn't stop. It intensified with each
Leave
beat,
the church
the sound of falling
immediately.
debris beginning to hit the church
and
floor,
find
at first a few
safety.
small pieces, then more and more. The sacred space suddenly became chaotic, filled with crashing sounds and gasping breaths. Father Pietro realized the danger was imminent. He tried to suppress the panic with a decisive shout, urging everyone to quickly leave the church, to run outside immediately to find safety. Immediately afterward, a tremendous crash echoed. The dome cracked and then collapsed with a deafening roar, tearing through the very fabric of space. The lights suddenly went out, and thick smoke and dust enveloped the entire stage, leaving behind darkness and a terrifying silence.
Help!
Amidst the ruin, only faint, flickering light remained amidst the dense darkness. Smoke and dust hung in the air, covering the entire space of the church, now a pile of rubble. From many directions, groans of pain and weak calls mingled in the chaos and fear. Maria frantically walked among the broken stones, her voice trembling but growing louder. She repeatedly called Giovanni's name, calling in despair, in the faint hope that her son would respond from somewhere amidst the ruins. But only a terrifying silence answered her, a cold emptiness without a single reply. Unable to maintain her composure, Maria cried out,
son?
her heart-wrenching sobs
prayed
echoing
every
amidst the
day.
ruins.
Place
She cried
all
out,
my faith in
asking
God.
where her son was, saying that she had prayed every day, placed all her faith in God, and believed that he would protect her only child. Those prayers were now shattered, falling apart like the stones around her. Father Pietro, also
Breathe,
slightly
steady
wounded,
yourself.
struggled to
We
approach
will
Maria.
find Giovanni.
His face
Hope
was
is not
covered in
yet
dust,
lost.
but his eyes
Why?
still tried to remain
If
calm.
God was
He
with
called
us,
Maria's
would
name,
he allow this
telling
to
her to
happen?
breathe, to try to calm down. He said they would find Giovanni, that hope was not yet lost. Maria looked up at him, her eyes red and empty. In despair, she questioned why, if her father had said God was with them, he would allow this terrible thing to happen. Why her faith would be tested so painfully. Father Pietro replied
God
in a
never
low,
promised
heavy voice.
freedom from
He said
suffering,
that God never promised to
only
spare
that
people
he
from
would
suffering,
remain with
but he
them
promised
within
to be
it,
with them in their suffering,
even in moments
even in the
this
darkest
dark
and most
and
desperate
desperate.
moments like this. Hearing those words, Maria could no longer stand. She collapsed amidst the rubble, covering her face with her hands, her sobs mingling with the darkness and dust, leaving a shattered image of a person amidst destruction and a faith tested. Part IV, Under the Rocks. A dim light shone on another corner of the stage, where Giovanni was trapped under a large beam and piles of broken stones. The space around him was almost completely isolated, eerily silent, with only the sound of heavy breathing echoing in the darkness. Giovanni gasped for breath, his chest aching with each attempt to inhale. With his remaining strength, he called out to his mother, his voice weak and trembling. Fear permeated every word as he realized he was trapped, unsure if anyone could hear him. After that call, there was only silence. No reply, no sign of life from the outside. That moment seemed to last forever, until, from afar, the church bells rang out. The sound was distorted, broken, yet clear, echoing through the heavy stone and wood pressing down on his body. Giovanni whispered softly, almost disbelieving
bells
his ears.
real?
He wondered if the bells
Does
were a
that mean
sign
I'm
that he was
still
still alive,
alive?
that he wasn't dead,
That the
somewhere
world
up
hasn't
there,
completely
the world
collapsed?
hadn't completely collapsed. He tried to move, even just a little, but the pain immediately overwhelmed him, causing him to groan in agony. The pressure on his body reminded him that he was still trapped under the rubble, teetering on the brink of life and death. Part V. The light returns. Light gradually returned to Maria, where the survivors were frantically digging through the debris. Dirt-stained hands moved incessantly, pushing aside rocks, lifting wood, in a tense silence tinged with the faint hope that someone might still be alive beneath. Suddenly, a parishioner cried out,
There are
his voice
survivors.
filled with
They're
excitement,
alive.
announcing that
Quickly,
there were
everyone
still
over
survivors.
here.
The cry was like a lightning bolt, tearing through the despair that enveloped the space. Everyone immediately gathered, digging faster and harder, as if hope had been rekindled after a long period of darkness. Giovanni was finally pulled out from under the rubble. He was
Thank you,
injured,
God.
his
Thank
body
you for
aching
this
and covered
small
in dirt,
miracle.
but his eyes were open, still conscious. The moment she
Amid
saw
the
her son, Maria
devastation.
couldn't hold back any longer. She rushed forward, embracing Giovanni, tears streaming down her face. Through her sobs, she whispered that he was here, that she thanked God, thanked him for this small miracle amidst the disaster. Giovanni weakly responded, his voice
I thought I
still
was going to
trembling and broken.
die.
He said he thought he was going to
darkness
die.
and fear
That darkness
nearly
and fear
consumed
had
me.
almost consumed him. But then he heard the church bells, that familiar sound that had awakened him, keeping him clinging to life on the fragile boundary. Father Pietro stood silently for a moment, then looked up at the remaining cross amidst the rubble. His gaze was pensive but resolute. He spoke slowly, saying that the dome might collapse, the walls might crumble to dust, but the bells of faith would still ring, persistent and unceasing, even amidst the ruins. Part V, the conclusion. The light gradually brightened, dispelling the lingering shadows on the stage. In that space, everyone stood silently together, silent in the face of the losses they had just experienced and what remained. The ruins were still there, but life had not been completely buried. The narrator's voice, slow and deliberate,
Amid
echoed
shattered
through the
stones
silence.
and ruins,
Amidst the shattered
the truth
stones and
becomes
ruins,
clear.
people finally realized
What
that the
mattered
most
was
important
never-
thing was not the cold blocks of stone or the magnificent structures, but the fragile life that continued and the love that held them together in adversity. Churches can be rebuilt, walls can be erected again from the ashes, but faith is not found in stone or mortar, but is built only from hearts that still know hope, still believe, and still dare to love, even after suffering. The church bells rang one last time, no longer as majestic as before, but clear enough to resonate through the air. That sound brought the story to a close, a silent reminder of the remaining faith amidst the ruins. The lights slowly faded, the curtain fell. Part VEI, after the earthquake. The stage gradually brightened in the late afternoon light. The violent shaking had ceased, replaced by a heavy silence after the earthquake. The rubble was temporarily covered with sheets and wooden planks, a fragile attempt to close the chapter on the disaster that had just occurred. The atmosphere carried a sense of weariness and exhaustion, yet also a faint glimmer of life continuing. Giovanni lay on a stretcher, his body sparsely bandaged, his face pale but still alert. Beside him, Maria sat down, clutching her son's hand tightly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing him again. Her gaze never left Giovanni's face, a mixture of worry and gratitude for that small miracle. The narrator's voice grew slow and low,
when the earth stopped shaking, people
matching
began to
the rhythm
tremble,
of the atmosphere.
not from danger,
When the
but
earth
from
stopped
realizing their
shaking,
own fragility.
people began to tremble
Are you still in
genuinely,
pain, Mijo?
not from fear of danger, but from realizing how fragile they were amidst the vastness of nature and the uncertainty of fate. Maria bent down close to her son, her voice soft and trembling, asking if Giovanni was still in much pain. In the fading twilight, the question was not just about physical concern, but also about the lingering fear of loss. Giovanni smiled faintly,
I am
though his
alive.
breath was still weak. He replied that he was
That
alive,
is enough.
that alone was enough to keep him hopeful and to prevent his mother from weeping again. Hearing those words, Maria couldn't hold back. She wept, tears falling silently. She placed her son's hand on her forehead, as if wanting to feel the familiar warmth, to be sure that life was real, that the nightmare was finally over. Part VEEI, a dialogue with faith. Father Pietro stood alone before the ruined altar, once the center of sacred rituals, now just rubble and dust. The slanted light cast a long, solitary shadow on the cracked stone floor. The silence was so profound that one could hear his heavy breathing. He gently looked up at the empty space where the cross
He
had once
calls
stood,
out God's name
then
with
began
sincerity,
a monologue, his voice low
that
and
though
weary.
he spent
He
his life
called out
preaching
God's
faith
name
to
with
others,
sincerity, confessing that throughout his life he had preached the faith to others. Yet today, he himself could not escape the fear of loss and sorrow. His gaze swept across the ruined space. This church had witnessed countless happy weddings, farewell funerals, and baptisms that ushered in new life. Every stone, every wall was connected to people and memories, yet now all that remained were silent fragments at his feet. After
If
a
God
long
still
silence,
holds
Father
love
Pietro
within this
slowly
ruin,
continued, as if in
then
direct
grant him the
dialogue with
courage
deepest
to
faith within his
remain,
heart. He said
to
that if God
serve,
still possessed a
to
loving heart
believe.
amidst this ruin, then he should grant him the courage to remain, to continue serving, to continue believing, even when all material support had crumbled. Having said this, he made the sign of the cross slowly and solemnly. In that moment, between the darkness and the slanted light, faith was no longer a preaching, but a silent yet steadfast choice. Part IX.
Whether,
The painful truth.
if
Maria
her
slowly
son had
approached Father
died
Pietro.
today,
Her steps were heavy, carrying
she
the
could
lingering
still
fear after the
believe in
disaster.
God.
She stopped before him, looked him straight in the eye, her voice trembling slightly but resolute, as if asking herself more than the person before her. She asked if, today, her son had died, she could still believe in God. Father Pietro did not
Whether,
answer immediately. He
if her
stood still
son
for a
had
few
died
seconds,
today,
letting the silence speak for the unspoken
she
words.
could still
His gaze
believe in
lowered,
God.
as if confronting a truth he himself had never dared to fully acknowledge. Then he slowly spoke, confessing that he didn't know the answer. Faith, he believed, wasn't always strong and unwavering. Sometimes, it was so fragile it almost vanished, a weak breath existing amidst the ruins of loss and sorrow. Maria nodded slightly,
no matter how
as if
fragile
understanding.
faith may be,
Her voice softened,
that single
no
breath
longer
is enough to
questioning,
keep people
only
living,
quiet acceptance.
to take one
She
more
said that
step
no
through
matter how
suffering.
fragile it was, that breath was enough to help people live on, to take another step amidst suffering, and not completely give up hope. Part X. The
A
hand
parishioner
cut bell.
reaches
A
for the
parishioner
remaining
approached the
bell
remaining
cord
bell
and
cord and tried
pulls.
to pull it down.
The rope
cord
tightens in
tightened
his hand,
but
no
no
sound
was produced.
follows.
The bell had fallen silent, no longer strong enough to ring as before. Silence fell again, a heavy silence that reminded us of unnameable losses. Giovanni struggled to sit up on the stretcher, pain etched on his face,
When the bell
but his
can
eyes
no
still
longer
bright.
ring,
He turned to Father Pietro,
people stole
his
out
voice
to one
weak
another.
but full of determination. He asked if the bell could no longer ring, people could still call out to each other, remind each other that they were still present together amidst this ruin. Everyone fell silent at the question.
They are alive.
No one
that
answered,
they must stay
but
together.
their eyes met,
that they
as
must
if they
not
understood
let
Giovanni's
silence
meaning
and
without
fear
needing
separate
further
them
explanation.
again.
Then Giovanni raised his voice, pouring all his remaining strength into it. His voice was still weak, but clear and resonant in the empty space. He said they were alive, that they should stay together, that they shouldn't let silence and fear separate them again. Slowly, one by one, they began to take each other's hands, trembling but warm hands connected in a fragile circle. Somewhere, someone bent down to pick up a piece of metal and gently tapped it. The sound was soft, rough, yet more like a bell than ever before. It wasn't the bell of stone and bronze, but the bell forged by the hands and the remaining life of humanity. Part Z. the new church. The stage lights gradually warmed, no longer harsh or dark, but gentle like the sunlight after a storm. People stood in a circle in the space that had once been the church, now devoid of its dome and sturdy stone walls, with only the open sky above and the people standing side by side. Father Pietro stepped into the center of the crowd.
The church may have
his
lost
gaze
its
sweeping
dome
across
and walls,
each face,
but as
still
long as
bearing the
people
marks of
stand
weariness,
together,
but now
the
softened.
church still
He spoke
exists.
slowly and clearly, more as an affirmation than a sermon. He said that the church might no longer have its high dome or solid walls, but as long as people still stood there, knowing how to love one another, how to hold hands in times of hardship, how to forgive and support one another, the church was still present, alive, and more real than ever. The narrator continued in a thoughtful silence.
Some
There are
disasters are strong enough to destroy stone and mortar, to collapse structures thought indestructible.
Structures. But it is also these disasters that silently build people, forging compassion, unity, and new faith from the ruins. In the gradually warming light, the circle of people stood still. No more words needed. The new church was not built of stone, but of hearts that still knew how to feel, still knew how to hope, and still knew how to stay together. Part I, open ending. Maria gently helped Giovanni to his feet. His steps were still slow and heavy, but steady enough to stand beside his mother in the gradually silent ruins. Both looked up at the remaining, chipped cross, where deep cracks seemed to carry the memories of pain and loss, yet it had not yet fallen. Giovanni spoke softly, his voice weak but no longer trembling with fear.
The church,
he asked
the
his
life
mother if they could rebuild everything. Rebuild the church.
We will rebuild
what had been
but
swept
first
away
from
in the
the
earthquake.
heart.
Maria looked at her son, her eyes gentle but resolute. She nodded and replied that they would rebuild, but they had to start from their hearts first, from faith, love, and patience for each other. The light slowly shone on the cross, highlighting the cracks
From
still bearing the
somewhere
marks of time.
unseen,
From somewhere, a bell rang softly.
a bell
Imperfect,
rings
not as full as
softly.
before, but clear enough to spread through the silent space, like the continuing beat of life. The narrator spoke slowly, his voice
Where
both
people
concluding
still know how to
and
love,
opening. Amidst
to
the
hold
ruins,
hands,
life
and
still
not turn their
spoke,
backs on
still
hope.
found a way to speak,
The church has
however weak. And where people still knew how to love, still knew how to hold hands and not turn their backs on hope, the church never truly collapsed. The light faded. The curtain fell, leaving behind the lingering echo of an imperfect bell, yet enduring and resonating in the silence.